Hello. So we're going to read our next part of our bedtime story read aloud. Um, so we left the party going ahead and going. They're along the Truckee River, which means they're coming up to the pretty high part of the Sierras. They're going to start climbing up into the Sierras. And the Reeds kind of have nothing left. They have a little bit of food, some dinner plates, and then they also have two really sick old horses that the little kids take turns riding. They don't have a wagon anymore because they don't have any oxen, and so they just kind of are walking, which is pretty rough. Remember, we left one of the members of the wagon train named Mr. Wolfinger was missing. Do you think the Indians killed him? People were asking each other. If only Papa doesn't get killed, Virginia cried when she heard of it. We haven't found any sign of his camping place for several days now, and Mama is worried. I can tell whenever she has one of her headaches. Everybody wants him to bring food. They've all forgiven him, declared Patty. Now they're talking against Mr. Stanton. They say if he did get to California, he'd be a fool to come back here and risk his life for strangers. But we aren't strangers, are we? They mean they're not. They mean we're not related to him, Virginia explained. Mr. McCutcheon has a wife and a baby to think of, but Mr. Stanton took care of his mother until she died, and so he never got married. I guess he has brothers and sisters back east, but no one in the company. Then he won't come back, will he? There's your answer, Virginia said, pointing. Down in the valley, which had narrowed into a canyon, came Mr. Stanton with two friendly-looking Indians and a number of pack mules loaded down with provisions. It was Mr. McCutcheon who had not returned. Where's Mac? A shout went up from the head teamsters and echoed across the canyon. Another teamster said something about him being a good target for Indians, and Mrs. McCutcheon nearly fainted. When Stanton was near enough to make himself heard, he called out that Mac was safe in California. He took sick, but they'll take good care of him at Sutter's Fort. It's called Fort Sacramento now that it's occupied by the Americans. California has been declared a United States possession, but the war isn't over yet. Virginia had nearly forgotten about the war. There had been so many little disputes right here in their own company. Now she heard that the Californians who had raised the Bear flag in a revolt, led by Kit Carson and Fremont, had joined the U.S. forces and needed men like McCutcheon. He won't stay and fight, will he? Mrs. McCutcheon seemed to think that she and the baby were being deserted. Not Mac. He's determined to get the whole company through before the snow falls. We met Hastings camped in Bear Valley. He thinks you people aren't far enough along. And whose fault is that? Again they were ready to blame Hastings, but fair-minded little Stanton soon quieted them. He had more to tell. Hungry as they were, he brought the Reed children something better than food, the news that their father was alive and that he and Big Mac would soon be on the way to meet them. How was he? Asked Virginia. Did he suffer much on the way to California? Stanton was forced to admit that Mr. Reed looked very bad. They had met him and his teamster Walter Heron not far from Sutter's Fort. They had given them a horse. Mr. Reed's gaunt skeleton of an animal was not able to carry him and would have been killed for what little meat was left on its bones if the men themselves had been strong enough to do it. They had eaten only 3 times in 7 days. But now they'll all get through all right, Charlie Stanton finished reassuringly. He started them off toward Sutter's Fort. A few days there would fix your paw up fine. You ought to rest a day or two yourselves and fatten up the cattle before you start across the mountains. That's bad advice. They need to hurry. This advice was for the whole company. They took it, but not without some grumbling. So again, now they're going to spend time just sitting and relaxing before they cross the mountains. And even though they're tired, if they would have hurried, one more day would have made them get over the mountains. It was the 20th of October when they made camp in Truckee Meadows and let their cattle out to graze. Many were impatient to be off. Patrick Breen, who had been studying the sky, said it looked as if it might be snowing in the mountains. We'd best ride ahead and make sure the pass is clear, declared William Pike. Bill Foster, Mrs. Murphy's other son-in-law, agreed. But the evening before they planned to start, Will Pike was accidentally shot while cleaning his pepper-box pistol. "We're just plain unlucky," the people began telling each other. Pike's death caused still more delay. But finally, about the 25th of October, the Donner Party started off again. This time the Reeds did not have to walk. They packed what few possessions they had left on one of Stanton's mules. Mrs. Reed and little Tommy rode on another. Charlie Stanton selected Virginia to ride with him, leaving Patty and Jim to travel behind his Indians. "We must look funny," Virginia commented. She and Charlie Stanton laughed about it. While they were riding, she told him of how they had planned to ride into California like a princess in a palace wagon. "But here I am riding with you on the back of an old mule," she finished. "You have come down a bit," he admitted. "But you'll get back what you lost. California is a rich country." "I don't care how rich it is. If Pa's there and we can have a real home again, that's all I want." "Look, Mr. Stanton," Virginia exclaimed. "That's snow on the mountains. It's raining down here, but that's snow falling up ahead." "There was a little snow on the ground when I came through," he admitted. "The pass is still clear, though. We don't get much snow this early in the season, only a little when it rains in the valleys." "I see," Virginia said, and fell silent. The whole company camped together for the last time in a pretty little valley at the junction of Alder and Prosser Creeks. Snow was falling lightly, frosting the pine branches and covering the grass so that the cattle had to nose through it for food. The Donners had already made camp when the other wagons halted beside them. "We've been having bad luck," Olathe told Virginia and Patty. "One of our axles broke and the whole wagon went over." So those of you that know about cars, you know that the axle is, you have wheels and they're held together by the axle. So if the axle breaks on your wagon, then it snaps, and that means the wheels are going to not work. They're not going to go around anymore. And it also means that you have to stop and cut down a big long tree and whittle it down so that you have a long piece of wood to replace the axle. And so that's not an easy, it's not like having a flat tire for your car. It's not an easy fix. So their axle broke, and you're going to see that's going to cause a big problem. "One of our axles broke and the whole wagon went over. We pulled out Francis and Georgia, but little Eliza was almost smothered. We found her under a heap of things we wanted to take with us. I guess now we'll have to throw more stuff away before we can go on." More snow fell during the night. Threatening storm clouds hung over the mountains when the wagons started off the next morning. The Breens and the Keysburgs had a head start. The Murphys followed. Behind them went Uncle Billy Graves and his family. The Reeds on Charlie Stanton's slow-moving mule train brought up the rear. The Donners still hoped to catch up as soon as their wagon was repaired. So the Donners were really far ahead of everyone else, and now they're going to be lagging way behind because of their broken axle. "I guess the little girls are all right now," Virginia told Charlie Stanton as they rode past the Donner camp. Francis, Georgia, and Eliza were outside. They stood watching their father and their Uncle Jacob shaping the axle with a chisel. Aunt Tam was watching the sky. Her face looked anxious, Virginia thought, but she did smile in her usual friendly way. Virginia smiled back, and Patty turned around, holding on to the Indian with one hand, and waved with the other. She waved to Mary's mother and her little brothers, too. Mary called something about another doll's tea party, but by then they had passed the Donners, many of whom they would never see again. So the Donners really had a tough time of it. While they're fixing the wagon, one of the Donner men is going to hurt his arm really badly, and that's going to cause him to get really sick. And most of the Donners, the only Donners that survived were the little kids. So they were pretty far back behind everyone else, and they really had a rough time of it when the snow started falling hard. All right, we will stop with that cheerful, many of whom they will never see again. All right. Thanks for joining me. I will talk to you later.